Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life.
Dude, that shirt just reeks of freedom.
Dude, I saw it. I had to have it. I had to order it from Europe. So
Wait. You got a shirt with the eagle on it from Europe?
yeah, dude. And I don't know how this is going to pan out, but it's got like IPSC targets on it.
Why is that made in Europe?
I don't know. IPSC stores got the best jerseys. So it took a long time to get here.
Oh, man. You know what? We haven't officially started the podcast yet, but I think I'm leaving that part in on the recording just because it's just perfect.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. I've got my buddy Eric Kamps on here. Eric Kamps is a world-traveling USPSA grandmaster who loves shooting IPSC all over the place. A chemical engineer, is that correct?
Microbiologist. But
Microbiologist, okay.
I left the lab, so I'm in field services now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, drive a truck. So
anyway, a well-educated truck driver, avid IPSC and USPSA competitor and grandmaster shooter, Eric Kamps, winner of the Race to GM. So
yes.
yes. All right, Eric. In case there's anything I didn't cover that people should know about you, why don't you go ahead and fill people in real quick?
Oh yeah, well, I'm Eric Kamps. I from Wisconsin. Like shooting. I run the Northern Illinois Shooting Association, and we are having a major match coming up. So busy planning that, and shoot a fair amount of IPSC, and I was running for IPSC regional director. So
I saw that.
Yeah.
Is that settled yet, or is that still?
I think they're going to put a pin in it for a while. That's what I'm going to
Okay.
guess. It's all clear as mud at the moment.
The last thing I think we should talk about on this show is USPSA politics. So let's just leave that one be.
Okay.
All right. So I have known Eric for a long time. Eric and I think you actually started USPSA before me a little bit.
Yeah, I think like a couple of months, right? I started January 2nd or 3rd, 2015.
And then we shot together at McHenry IPSC Society.
Yes.
Up in at Alpha Range in McHenry, Illinois. And did a lot of shooting together over the years.
We went a lot of places.
League nights. Yeah, league nights, major matches, a bunch of stuff. I've beat you to master by like a match.
It might have been, or maybe more than that. We'd have to look back at the record, but you definitely got there
pretty
first.
Close.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you soundly trounced me on making GM. Did that pretty quickly, and
that took quite a bit more after that.
But then you've done a lot of shooting since and done well for yourself. So,
well, thank you.
I use you as an example in my classes all the time. So anybody who's ever heard me tell the story about the one person I know that can shoot incredibly fast and accurately but can't shoot a group, that's Eric.
That's me.
Not that you can't shoot a group, but you know what I'm saying.
It's not as good as I want it to be. So something I always work on.
Yeah. I have eternally mocked your technique and grip since the day we met. You're actually the guy on the right side of that argument, because form should follow function, not the other way around, and you can't argue with the results. So I have admitted that for the purposes of the podcast nationally, and everybody will know it, but that is not going to stop me from mocking you and making fun of you until the day we die, just so you know.
That's fair. I earned that one.
Let's see what else. There may have been some oxygen deprivation therapy involved at some of our matches, but we can get into that later.
Yeah. And I probably earned those too.
Now, for those of you that can't tell, Eric is a longtime friend and one of my closest friends, and just a really good dude. He let me do the ceremonial cutting of the beard when he made GM with a rusty dull knife.
I think
I have that on video.
Find.
Yeah, I think I have that on video. I should probably find that and we should post that.
It's definitely on my Instagram, just many years ago now.
All right, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. Let's talk about training. One of the things I think that's your real strong points is your work ethic, how much time you put into dry fire and training and how much time you spend shooting. And then here's another one where I'm going to give you some props. You and I actually used to argue about this. Okay. I used to be a firm believer in the primacy of testing, drilling in isolation, and retesting over other training methods. And at the time, you were already doing more of what I would call an interleaving style of training, where you were training everything kind of in combination and mixing it up. And over the years, I've become more and more convinced, not that I don't think my point of view has value as well, my original point of view, I think that matters too. And to be fair, you also do a lot of that style of training. I've seen you grind away at 4 aces in dry fire until your hands bleed. So it's not like you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
But I've really been kind of realizing lately that I have historically underestimated the importance of kind of randomized training in combination, especially after talking with some friends of mine that have trained with Eric Kamps, including Les, right?
Yeah.
And how he trains. And I used to think that it was valuable and important, but I also thought that it was something that he did because he was so advanced and that you need to do something a little bit different to get you there. And I do think there's still some truth to that. I think that doing it from like to your late intermediate stages of shooting skill is probably the right way to go. But then once you reach a certain point, I think it's a lot more valuable to do like this sort of combination style of training. And where I do think I was wrong is I think that point is earlier in your development than I previously thought. Like I kind of figured you should do a little bit of that, like Les's Calvin ball a little bit, and stuff like that. But you should reserve using that as your primary training modality until you're like, an Eric Kamps or a JJ or, one of those guys. And I'm kind of thinking that I was wrong about that. I'm kind of thinking that probably, kind of late intermediate is probably about the right place to start shifting to where you're doing a majority of that, a lot less of the isolation stuff. So what are your thoughts on that? Because we had this argument years ago. I even wrote a blog post about it.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to hear what you think.
It really depends on the person's like awareness, right? Like I think the key to getting good is being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. So kind of understanding what your end goal is. So like all of my training, let's say, is basically for USPSA style shooting. You kind of have to look at the problem that you're going to be encountering and then try to figure out how to be most successful, most consistently. And that's where that, like, you use the big word there, interwoven training or something.
Interleaving. I didn't invent the word. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that has a lot of value because you're going to be training more for the style of testing that you're undergoing, right? If a person was looking at having just a really fast draw or really good splits, like a very isolated portion of the whole thing, then it really wouldn't make sense to mix in other stuff. But since like a USPSA style stage does test all those things at once, you want to have a baseline. Like understanding your baselines is very important. And then understanding how you can manifest them at different difficulties in different situations. And that, I think, brings a lot of consistency to the performance.
Well, and I honestly think that because, historically my strength has been my peaks and my weakness has been my consistency, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been good at burning it down a fair amount of the time, but not enough of the time to have a consistently good match performance. You know what I'm saying?
I would agree with that. Yeah. And it's,
and I think that like I held on, And you would think I would have learned this by now, because it's the same as when I switched to like more performance style shooting from like more tactical style shooting training, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was hard for me to let go of the things I had held on that had gotten me to a certain point, but weren't going to get me any further. And here I went and did it again in performance style shooting. I held on to the things that got me to like masterclass shooting long after they had ceased getting me the results I wanted. You know?
Well, I mean, and you were really big on metrics, and metrics, I mean, they're a thing to measure, right? Like, number of reps, fastest times, that kind of stuff. So it's hard to argue with it as a form of evidence in a sense, right? Like you look at it and you're like, my draw has gotten faster, my splits, my transitions, all that stuff. But in the end, like the problem is more complex than that, because it's about bringing it to each situation and being able to maximize your efficiency on it, And
I also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, brother, but
no,
like,
that's okay.
I also,
I had a late thought there, and that's where it can get kind of difficult, because it'll be, you'll look at whatever the metric is, and then it'll end up never being exactly that in most situations in a match setting. So, like a good split and a good transition at X distance, well, now you begin to play with that distance or target difficulty. It'll change what that expected outcome should be, like whatever your most efficient outcome is. And so, in a sense, kind of training for a gradient of that, from the most difficult to the most easy, and many, many points in between, and mixing it up kind of gets you used to that gear shift. And the gear shift is one of the things that I think, or I believe in practical shooting, we get tested on the most. How often is it like a close burner target, hard piece of steel, tuxedo, whatever it is? Like being able to switch that and do it efficiently is kind of where you save a lot of time.
And I think that ability to shift gears seamlessly and accurately is one of the hardest things to develop for most people too.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that it's also, so let's take the real world, right? You don't know what the gunfight is going to be until it happens. So it's still a random test. It's still performance on demand. And you still need to have that mental transmission built to where it's reliable, that mental transmission about shifting, the pace of your shooting, what level of sight confirmation am I getting? How careful am I pressing the trigger? How hard can I drive the transition? How steady does my dot have to be? Like, you still need to have the ability to shift the appropriate level of all of those things without having to think too hard about it or overthink it, and without making mistakes.
And with stress involved, right? Like,
and with stress involved.
I've never been in a tactical situation, but the buzzer does put a fair amount of stress on people. We all know that. And so to be able to, like you said, not overthink it, not spend undue time trying to process what's going on, kind of already have it in your back pocket. Like, this target requires this much sight confirmation, this much discipline on my trigger pull. Anything more than that is wasted time. Anything less than that is like wasted effort.
Yeah. Yeah. Using, what does Graffel say? Use all the time you have, and not a second more, like not a fraction of a second more.
Yeah.
Use all the time you have, but not any more than the time you have, right?
Exactly.
Or all the time you need, not all the time you have, all the time you need to make the shot.
Because if you don't make the shot, you're behind the 8 ball. You're never getting that time back. You're never getting that shot back. Like, whatever application this is, whether real life or practical shooting, like, there are consequences for that.
And I've even, because I've been like playing around with that virtual reality setup, right?
Yeah.
So I've even been doing this kind of training in that the last couple of weeks. Like, I'll still warm up with some draws and reloads and some build drills and stuff, right? And kind of get primed for it. And then after that, everything is just random. Mm-hmm. And it's not just random in terms of which like virtual reality stage I choose. It's random in the stage. Like, if I hit the random like stage generator and it gives me, say it gives me a Blake drill, right? So I might run it left to right. I might run it right to left. I might run it strong hand only, right to left, or left to right, or weak hand only. Then I might run it with a reload in between each one. Or I might run the first target freestyle, reload, the second target strong hand only, reload, the third target weak hand. Like, increase the complexity each rep and change it up each rep and try to make it fresh each time.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefit to that. When I do, like, because of, I have a baby now and stuff, so like I don't have quite as much time to dedicate to live fire. So I like to do my stuff cyclically, and definitely bringing it, like when I go and do the live fire, like I like to take a core concept. It'll usually be like an array, maybe at a match that I like struggled with, whatever it be, far targets, close targets, partials, whatever. And I'll start with that, and that'll kind of give me, like, not to get all hippy dippy about it, but you kind of have a feeling for the day when you step out there, like where's my focus, where's my attention level. And then so you set your baseline with that. Okay, so I shot these 3 targets, and this is what I got, and this is what I want to improve on, or what I did well. But then adding in the randomness, so like I'll add in more targets, I'll add in more positions, like Kelvin ball, right? Where in a sense I'm tackling a core thing that I want to work on, but I'm never tackling it the same way too many times, especially as the practice session goes on.
A concept I heard recently that I really like is getting looks on something in your training. And this was in the context of fighting, right? It was actually in the context, the conversation was about a left hook, okay? But the idea was throwing it against as many sparring partners as possible and as many situations as possible, because each one of those looks is a little bit different. Even though it's your hook, it's never the same twice. Yeah. And if you think about it, going back to what you're talking about with practical shooting, right? Like it's never exactly the same twice. Even if it's the classifier and it's supposed to be set up exactly the same, it's still never exactly the same twice.
Oh, it's a different day every time, right? Like indoor, outdoor, sun conditions, weather.
Or your own performance. Your grip is slightly off on the draw, but you got to make it work because you don't have time because it's a classifier, right?
Exactly.
So having all those different looks, I think, gives you the ability to kind of make it work regardless of the context. And I think that while the block training style is very important for initial skill development, like it's crucial for that. Like you have to have it for that, right?
Yeah.
But once I have a good draw, I need to make the draw a little bit different every time, because it's going to be a little bit different every time. Once I have a good reload, I should try to make the reload a little bit different every time, because it's going to be a little bit different every time. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think there's some magic to that, not just for technical work, but also for, like, for lack of a better sense, tactical work. And I don't mean that in the true sense, like the sense people think. I'm not talking about, training for a real gunfight. That's not necessarily what I mean, although that is a subset of that. But it could be strategy on a stage. It could be, you're a combat sport athlete. You know how to make, your hip throw usable in a wide variety of situations, right? More not the technique itself, but how to set it up, how to use it, how to apply it, how to make it appropriate to the situation at hand, right? And so if like USPSA, that could be like, and this is such a concept that I am not at the skill level yet, but I saw this the other day and I really liked the concept, right? Not just when is it okay for me to push on a stage, but what particular target or two in a stage is okay for me to push on.
Oh, I agree with that. I tend to think of it as where can I, like, knowing myself as a shooter, gain efficiency? Like I'll look at a stage, I'm like, okay, like in this situation, if I shoot this target on the move, that's kind of a classic one, or an activator sequence, like how much can I get away with on this and gain time, let's say, over someone who doesn't, to try to hit that best time, best outcome type.
And is it in your personal wheelhouse to push there?
Exactly. Because if you aren't at the skill level and you try to go for it, you'll have catastrophic outcomes, like misses and all that kind of stuff. But if it's there, you don't want to be afraid to take to do it, right? Because otherwise you're just leaving time on the table.
And I think most people, they can't control the level to which they push with that precision.
It comes in time.
I think most people, if they push on the whole stage, or if they start pushing partway through a stage, they can't stop, right?
Or the worst
Or
is they make a mistake and they decide that that's the time they're going to start making up that lost ground. Oh, I took 2 shots on the steel to get it down. Well, now I have to light the stage on fire to make it up. Like, the time is gone.
Oh, that always works. That works every time. No, it never works.
It never does.
Never works. No, no, definitely not. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think, and like the other thing too is, and this is something else that I'm not there yet, but, and this is something I'm actively working on. I'm actively working on both these things right now because I'm trying to train them. Like, I'll go back in that virtual reality setup. I will intentionally push the beginning of a longer stage until the wheels start to come off, and then pull myself back to where it's within my reliable level of pace, my reliable pace, right? Yeah. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to learn to do that when I make a mistake and I need to dial it back. When I've pushed too far by mistake, not on purpose, and now I've got to push back or pull back. I mean, because I think that's an important skill, and I think a lot of people don't have that,
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, any kind of training and stuff, there's so many facets to it. Like, shooting is simple and complex all at the same time. Like, we were kind of talking about where you can push, but I would say conversely, there's sometimes that the opposite is almost true, where you'll say during this portion of the stage, it's execution is going to be where I'm going to save time. And it may not feel like it, bar steel, bar partials. And so once again, going back to that gear shift of like, okay, I just went out of an area where I was shooting fast on the move, but now I'm setting up for something. Like, you have to have the mental wherewithal to be like, this part of the stage is different. And I mean, visualization is where you gain that, like the mind's eye of how the performance should look. What do you always say? Like, a good stage feels timeless. And that is absolutely true. Even though like your foot speed, your trigger speed, your target acquisition speeds might be vastly different from spot to spot in that stage, it all kind of has to have a feel to it, which takes a lot of effort, I believe, to like be really good at.
I think it takes, and I would almost say effort is a misleading word. And I'm not saying you're incorrect in using it. It takes a lot of effort and training to be able to make it to where you're not using any effort when you shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. Nomenclature and all that, I'll probably misstep quite a bit through all this, like just using my words, which are,
But you understand what I'm trying to say, right? Like, because I know that like if I try to make that mental state happen, it's guaranteed not to happen.
Yeah.
If I try to force it, it's not going to come, right? It's just not going to happen. Because then I'm trying to, in the words of your favorite shooting podcaster, I'm using the conscious mind.
Well, there's a lot to be said about that, and that takes you all the way back to the beginning of the conversation about, basic drills. Like, why do you do them? Well, it's so that you don't have to think too much about a draw. You don't have to, all that should be subconscious. So your mind's, the conscious mind's focusing on more important stuff.
Oh, I've got a little sidebar here that we got to bring up. Why are you doing the drill? I think a lot of people do the drills just because they're doing the drills.
And at a certain point that is important, but yeah, it's the beginning, not the end.
I think that like people are doing a bill drill to get good at the bill drill, and that's not the point of the bill drill.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a bill drill's been a stage at nationals one time that I'm aware of. Right. Like that's not the point of the bill drill. The point of the bill drill is to achieve certain things, certain training effects for your shooting, right? And it's the same thing with all those drills. Like, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not really about how good you are at bill drills and Blake drills and the L-Pres and 4 aces. It's really about how good am I at making those elements of my shooting work regardless of the situation.
Yeah.
The elements I'm trying to develop with those drills. And I think a lot of people look at the drill almost like an achievement in and of itself. And I've been guilty of that too. I mean,
in some sense, it is, but it's not the end of the process. It's like mastering something or getting good at it, I'd say.
All right. That was just a sidebar. Where were we? We were talking about
We were
randomizing the
randomized training, yes, and interwovenness. And, and to take that a step further, one of the things is when I look at like my schedule and things I want to do and accomplish, because time has become more of a premium. So it's like when I get there, I've also found a lot of value in longer, like, don't want to call them drills, but let's say like mini stages or pushing like the endurance factor of your shooting, because that begins to matter too in some situations. It's not often that, like, I would say physical endurance matters. It's not like I'm running a marathon or anything like that, but yes, mental. Like, hey, you're going to shoot, like a stage is usually 32 rounds, but I'll make a 40-round drill and just kind of executing this thing over and over again with that time factor weighing on you.
One of the things I want to start playing around with is, and this it's kind of the way Calvin ball works in a sense, right? But I want to do it in a wider variety of situations in my training. Take like a little mini stage like you talked about, and each successive repetition, if I am successful by whatever measure of success I'm giving myself, which might be I want to shoot all alphas, or it might be I want to hit factor higher than this, or it might be I want to do this in a faster time than this, like whatever thing I pick for that first run, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm successful, then I will up the complexity. Maybe I'll add an extra pass on an array of targets. Maybe I'll add a reload in there. Maybe I'll add a third round per target. Maybe I'll add the last 3 targets are strong hand only. Do something to increase the complexity and difficulty every time.
Mm-hmm.
And then like pursue that for a little bit and then mix everything up again and move on from there,
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I like that idea quite a bit. Something I do in my training, one of my favorite props is actually a shooting box. And if I don't have a shooting box, I'll make like a triangle or a box out of fault lines. But so I'll have this target array, and then I'll give myself like, let's say a triangle is the easiest to visualize, but I'll go from point to point on the triangle and I'll shoot the targets, right? So starting in the back right to left to forward to back. And then I'll decide how many times I want to do that. And then I'll check the outcome. Okay, so I ran it aggressively. How do my hits look? Or are my hits good? Okay, having said that, I'll put the reload in when I'm retreating, right? So now you're working an over-the-shoulder reload, or maybe I'll try to take one of these targets on the move. And then by doing that, you can get a lot of different analytics from it. Like, like you said, you can get your hit factor, you can get the all alpha thing, but then you can also start looking at visualization. Like by making it a simple array, relatively complex with a lot of shooting positions, you should be able to start to recall how that went, where it's like, okay, on position 2 on my setup, I wasn't totally settled. That's when I threw the miss. That's when I shot the no shoot. Okay, take that in isolation. Okay, so that happened. How can I work on that the next time I run this? Okay, taking that out of the equation, how does the rest of it look? So like a single run in that style, I think can give you a lot of different feedbacks if you're at a point where you're able to take all of that feedback. It's not just the hits, it's not just the time. It can be other things like, well, I bobbled the reload, but then, somehow I made it up on time over the rest of it. How can I make the reload in that position better?
How soon were my sights on a particular target?
Yes.
Did I have the gun up? How stable was I coming into position? Did I still have to do what Tom Castro calls the crash after I stopped moving? Like all those little things, right? And it's my turn to sound kind of hippy dippy, okay? But I think mindfulness is the single most important quality in your training as a shooter.
I agree.
Not the single most important point of organizing your training or what you're working on, but the single most important quality to develop as a trainee is the ability to be mindful with each rep and each part of every rep and not zone out,
Yeah, I would definitely, like at a certain point, if you're not getting anything out of something, you should stop doing it. Like, I'm not saying quit training entirely, but I'm saying like, if you're at the range and you're just expending ammunition and not getting anything out of it, then maybe it's time to pack up the bag,
I feel personally attacked.
I didn't mean that. I did, like, let's say 90-10 on that one. But no, it goes even a step further where it's like, what makes training valuable. And so I always kind of think that, like, amongst peers of shooters, like whatever your level of commitment is, like, not trying to exclude people who train a lot or people that don't train as much. But if you got to think of two shooters who are identical, go to the range and shoot the same number of rounds or do the same amount of dry fire, what is the thing that's going to separate those two shooters at the next match or test? And it's going to be your mindfulness, your ability to grow from every round fired, every drill run, that kind of thing. And
every bullet should be a lesson.
It should be. And you kind of have to grow into that. It does take quite a few rounds down range before you're like, oh yeah, what am I doing wrong here?
Well, I'm not saying I learned. I know I'm not saying I learned this the easy way.
No, I'm aware. Very, very aware. But it can be intimidating. It's like, my perspective as a civilian dude coming into this, like, ammo's expensive, time's hard to get, that kind of thing. And you begin to look at people that have much more time and ammo to their availability, and you're like, well, how will I ever catch or surpass these people in my training? Well, it's like you have to fill in the rest of that, fill in the rest with mindfulness. You have to get more out of it. You have to make it count more.
You have to increase the quality instead of the quantity.
Yes.
Not that quantity isn't important too.
Quantity has a quality.
Quantity is a quality. Yes. I also think that frequency matters more than duration, I think.
Oh yeah. 100% on that.
Like I love when I asked Bob Vogel years ago about his dry fire schedule. And he goes, well, I don't really have any set schedule, but I can tell you there's not a day that goes by I don't have a gun in my hand.
And that matters, right? Like the familiarity and stuff, like it just builds exponentially that way.
Yeah. And I kind of in a related note to like quantity and quality and all of that, right? And I don't want to sound like a commercial, but I love this setup. I love this virtual reality thing. I've been doing the ACE. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why. It gives me the same feedback as live fire and dry fire. And it's more immersive, which means that even though it's still dry fire, because I'm seeing the dot move and I'm in this virtual range with targets that move and everything else, it helps me visualize the real thing better. And because there's no setup, no tear down, no moving targets around, even scale targets, the amount of repetition I can get in a short amount of time is insane.
Yeah.
Like those three things alone, I think are incredibly valuable. I mean, is it perfect? No. It's of course not. No tool is perfect, but I think it's helping me get both a better quality and quantity in my dry fire training.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I've only messed around with it a little bit at friends' houses, and yeah, I mean, not having to drag everything out, there's something to be said about that, the ease of it, right? Like, I would say for most people in most situations, it's hard to compete with live fire training, but it's also one of the most difficult aspects for anyone to work into their life. It's like you have to have a range or property to go to. You have to have the ammo available. You have to have all that stuff set. And so those are all hurdles you have to overcome that you don't with a setup.
And even like the simplest, and I'm not knocking live fire, that's not my point. But yeah. So say the simplest productive training session for someone of your skill level, right? You need 3 to 5 targets. Mm-hmm. You need a few shooting positions. Like there's still setup involved. There's still setup. Even the simplest arrays you can use to get results take time to set up and tear down. I mean, it's just, there's time to it. Then there's travel time to the range. Time loading ammo, time loading magazines, right? All that.
Well, yeah. And it's all stuff you have to overcome that in a virtual setting, you don't have to. So what do you do with that extra time? Like you rep,
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not saying that it's a substitute completely for live fire or even completely for dry fire. That's not my point. But I just like the amount of feedback I get and the variety I can get and the repetitions I can get out of it. Because I love the fact that I can get that volume, Mm-hmm. And back to the visualization thing, because I think the biggest weakness in my game as far as the sport goes, this doesn't really apply to like real world stuff, but it definitely applies to the sport, is my visualization process for stages of matches. I've never really given it the weight that I really should. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the ability to have that VR environment should, in theory, if I train the right way and practice the right way, help me with that process. You know what I mean? Because it's so immersive, you know?
Visualization is a tough thing. It's kind of like shot calling. Remember, you said something one time, like, you don't really get it till you hit a certain level, you know, true, like, good shot calling. And if someone's not to that level, trying to explain, like, it's like a picture in your mind, like the shot breaks and you're breaking a lot of shots fast, but you know exactly where the sights or dot was on every shot. Visualization is kind of the same way, where it's like, well, I picture myself doing the thing. They're like, well, someone who doesn't know what's going on will be like, well, we all do that. I'm like, no, I mean, like, I'm thinking about, like,
you're seeing where the dot is on each target and how it's lifting. You're seeing the movement of the gun in the side of your vision as your eyes snap to the next target. You're seeing exactly where your feet are going to be. Yeah. And
the angle of my shoulders as I come into the position, when I'm going to start shooting, the pace that I expect I'll be able to take those shots. Like, that's where you're going to start to save time outside of like mastering the fundamentals and stuff, because you're just executing faster or with less delay, or however people say it, you know, like, don't shoot faster, shoot sooner, or whatever. It's like, well, basically shoot faster, but yeah.
I think there's really two different things there. These are my thought on it, right? The movement piece is where you're thinking about shooting sooner.
Yeah.
And that by movement, I'm including transitions, right? Like, I'm including that too. That's still movement. You're moving the gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
The faster versus slower part of it, I just don't like the verbiage. And I'll tell you why. Most people, like people that come to my classes, if I tell them to shoot faster, they just do all kinds of screwed up shit. Like, it's just, they're trying to go faster. So they're literally not doing the things they're supposed to do. Right.
Well, and I mean, almost by definition, right? Like, to feel like you're doing something faster, you have to get out of your comfort zone or begin to cut corners on your technique. And that's where it kind of always falls apart.
And then if I tell someone to shoot slower, what usually happens is they do the same messed up stuff they did fast, but now they do it artificially slow. At least they were fast before. They might not have been accurate, but at least they were fast. Now they're not accurate and they're not fast, right?
Because they're adding time outside of everything but the execution, right?
Exactly. And I think
you still pulled the trigger poorly. You just waited longer between shots to do it.
And I think this is something that takes time. And it's something that even understanding what this looks like takes time. But if you have that, and I mean training time, like amount of training time, not time in the stage, right?
Yeah.
But if you have that feeling of timelessness that we talked about, then saying faster or slower makes no sense. And even trying to go faster or slower pulls you out of that feeling, right?
I agree.
I think what sets the pace, or what should set the pace, is what technique I choose to use. What do my sights look like? What does my trigger press feel like? You see what I mean? If I'm taking more care on my trigger press and I'm being more precise on my sight picture, then my pace will be slower as a result of that, but also more accurate.
You'll get the outcome.
For my current level of skill, right? If I'm being looser on my sight picture and more aggressive on my trigger press, then my pace will be faster as a result of that and less accurate. And knowing, this goes back to that transmission we were talking about that's so hard to build, right? Yeah. Knowing what gear to put my shooting in for a particular target, risk, and difficulty is the hard part.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, that's a tough one, because it's like, you know, so I feel like when I think back to my like early marksmanship training, you know, like I was in Boy Scouts and stuff, it was always so heavily accuracy based, but you almost, I feel for this kind of sport, you have to think of it as a minute of uncertainty almost, where, like you're talking about.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I am going to
Feel
steal
it.
that.
Go with it.
That is, I'm teaching a class next week. That's going to be in the class.
Excellent. But, it's like, you look at the two extremes of it, right? A hard target and easy target. It's like you will know how much technique you can cut out in order to achieve that faster, shot pace or, basically a shot pace on it. But, you have to know that for each target that you're shooting and tie that into your visualization. So that way you're not spending undue time thinking about it. You're not spending undue time on the execution, and you're still like getting the results or the hits that you want. So it does make it quick.
Yeah. And and this ties into your minute of uncertainty concept, right? I don't think it's just target difficulty. I think it's also target risk.
Yes.
So like in USPSA terms, that would be the difference between a hardcover target and a no-shoot.
Mm-hmm.
The hardcover, the only risk I have is a makeup shot. The no-shoot, no matter if I make it up or not, I'm losing points.
Yes.
So it's a higher risk. The example I always use for the real world is 7-yard shot. Guy's got a gun drawn. I've got to shoot him 7 yards away. 2:00 in the morning, industrial area in Chicago on the west side. Nobody lives there. Nobody's out and about. And behind him is a brick wall. That is a zero risk target. If I miss, all that's hurt is my ego, right? Mm-hmm. Assuming that I make up the shot and win the gunfight, right? That's a separate issue.
As long as you still win, right?
Right. Same exact target difficulty, same shooter, but now I'm in a gunfight with him on a sidewalk, and behind him is a playground and a kindergarten class at recess. Does that change the way I'm going to make that shot? Yeah, it is.
Definitely
the difficulty is no higher, but the risk is exponentially higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably a harder thing for people to learn the transmission for than target difficulty.
Yeah.
Like how many times do you see people that are plenty fast and accurate in USPSA, but they don't respect the no-shoot enough?
Oh, yeah. Or I always feel my case is almost the opposite, where I give it too much space because there's that subconscious, like, I know I can shoot that alpha all day, but I send it up into the Charlie because, well, I don't want to be too close to that no-shoot. And part of it is like when I'm thinking about engaging that alpha, it's like if there's no no-shoot on the lower A zone, well, okay, I shoot a Charlie or a Delta or something, but all of a sudden now that's a huge point swing for a Mike no-shoot. So you just kind of, okay, well, if I yoink one low, a little bit higher up will give me a better chance of being successful. But in reality, it's just handicapping you.
And between the two options being too not respecting it enough and being too cautious about it, that is the better way to err, is being too cautious.
Yeah.
But it's still, like you said, it's still an error. It's still hurting your performance overall. And like, that's where like the strategy comes in, right? So it's not just building the transmission, but knowing what amount of risk is acceptable given the circumstance. Like, okay, put it this way. Say it's the exact same shootout on the sidewalk, but he doesn't have a gun. He's a suicide bomber. So if I don't take him out, but if I send it low, he's gone. Like, we're all gone.
Yeah.
But if I don't send it fast enough, me and all the kids are gone anyway.
Yeah.
That changes things, right? So then what's the appropriate level of risk there? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's kind of the same kind of thing we're talking about. Like, how cautious is too cautious? How aggressive is too aggressive? And that's a separate issue from what is my skill set, from what I'm capable of.
I'm trying to think of how I explain to like maybe newer shooters where it's like to be successful at USPSA, you have your fundamental shooting skills and your ability to express them. Where it's like if you took two shooters with equal fundamental skills, like everything's the same, in this hypothetical, the person who can express them in the best way during a stage is going to have the better score. And then when you look at the populations of USPSA shooters, you'll often see somebody who like maybe doesn't have the best fundamentals, but is very good at executing the stage or expressing what they do have. Well, now their score is better, but you'll also see the people that are really fast but can't hit anything, so they can get that portion, but they don't have the first. So everyone, basically, your score is where they meet up.
Yeah. And I think too, man, I talked about this on another podcast recently, and I still can't remember who said it. I wish I could, because I'd love to give them credit for it. But they said matches don't measure your ceiling, they measure your floor.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And but it's like, it's true. It's like, what can you do on demand under stress without pushing too much or without hanging back too far? How are you going to display the skills you developed? Right.
Mm.
And that's, I think, a huge part of it. And it's almost a bigger variable in USPSA, in my opinion, than it is in the real world.
Yeah.
Even though it's important in both surroundings, right? Both contexts. Because it varies more in USPSA than it does in the real world.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff you can put out there, like distance shot, close shot, like
not just in the context of the stage design, but also when you're fighting with someone, a fight is a two-way thing, right?
Mm.
So it becomes, you need the hard skills of the shooting, but that's like punching and kicking the heavy bag, right?
Yeah.
You've still got to have all the other stuff too. So because all that other stuff plays into it, it's not that the shooting piece isn't the most important piece, because I think it probably is, but it's not the only piece, which lowers the overall importance of it just enough to make these other things have a factor, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the USPSA match, and say you're looking at like a 32 round field course, there's so much more room for error and room for mistake in that than there is when you're in a gunfight with one person at close range, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have more opportunities to make mistakes. You have more opportunities to push too far. You have more opportunities to hang back too much. You know what I mean?
You could say you have more demand on you to succeed, in a sense of like, you successfully overcome one part of the stage, but there's 3 or 4 more parts that now you still have to dig down and be as successful throughout the whole thing. Like measuring that consistency from spot to spot.
And of course, we're talking generalizations. I mean, obviously there are outlier situations in both circumstances, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but in general, I would argue that that's kind of a generally true statement,
Mm-hmm. I like
especially because you're measuring just that one part of it, just the hard skill part of it. And you're measuring it to such a small degree. Like, if you lose to somebody by 10% at nationals, like say you're the super squad and you lose another super squad guy by 10%, you got dunked on, right?
Yeah.
What is that in the real world? That's a tie. which means you both lost. But you see what I'm saying, right? Like, it's you're slicing it down to such a fine degree. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing. I think it's a great thing.
What makes competition great, right? There's winners and losers.
Well, but not just that. It gives you, we were talking about data and metrics earlier, and improvement and kind of improving yourself. It gives you those metrics to such a fine degree.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back through a stage and go, okay, I lost time here. I threw a Charlie there when I shouldn't have. My movement was unsteady coming in here. And you have all these like little bitty places to make improvements, right?
Yeah.
Well, but that's how you get really, really good over time. It's like slicing away those little bitty things to make improvements. So I'm not saying, this is not a criticism at all of USPSA.
I'm not taking it as such. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually quite the reverse. It's actually kind of a reason to do competitive shooting, even more so. You know what I mean? Because it's going to give you such a huge level of feedback on what you need to improve on and what you're good at.
And there's typically no maximum score, right? Like,
yeah,
it's whoever shows up is going to set the score. But if a different person of higher caliber did, now the high score just goes up, or day to day.
And sooner or later, we will reach the limit of human performance, but we're not there yet.
No.
And not only are we not there yet, but you look at the competitors today compared to even just like when you and I started, and it's night and day. Like it's insane how good people are now.
Well, I mean, there's more tools now than there were then. And I think that it's kind of like a crucible, right? Which is kind of the point of IPSC, USPSA is a crucible for gear and technique. And, as people figure things out, the waste gets thrown away and the good stuff keeps getting propagated.
And it's more popular now. So there's more of a pool of athletic talent. You're getting some kids coming in now that, are just the athletic talent of these kids is insane. Like they would be world class at whatever sport, within reason. Like, I mean, Christian Seiler is probably not going to be in the NBA because he's just not tall enough. But you know what I'm saying? He could sure be a pro baseball player if he wanted to be, without a doubt. And that was his other sport.
Well, I can tell you when you look at, like, let's just take USPSA clubs, a big factor in how good the average shooter or even the best shooter is going to be at that match is the population centers around it. I'm not crapping on any clubs around me, but it's like being around Milwaukee and Chicago, we have large population centers. So if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, it's like if 1 in 100,000 people take to this sport and 1 out of 10 of those guys takes it really serious, you're going to have more people being hardcore about it.
Oh, absolutely. And then with the national popularity increasing, say you've got, 1 out of 10 is going to take it seriously. And then out of that, 1 out of 100 is a gifted national or world level gifted athlete. That's how you get the guys that just keep getting better and better.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good thing, more people training, more people getting after it. Because another true thing, and I mean, you were part of it, was like when you get a group of guys or gals or whatever, a group of people in your club that are taking it seriously, it's hard to be the person that isn't.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Peer pressure is a very real thing. Yeah. Peer pressure is a very real thing.
And in a good way, where it's like, I don't want to be the worst shooter of my 3 friends. Like, I have to go and figure this out. And that's the pressure, the motivation to do it.
No, absolutely. Well, I think we are coming up on an hour.
Is it?
I know you got to get back to. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dude, we could talk for hours about this stuff. It's like I was talking to Chuck Pressburg before you. I don't know if you know who he is. He's on the tactical side of things, right?
Okay.
And it's the same thing. We looked up and it was like we blinked and the whole hour had gone by. It's just, that's why I do this. I get to talk to people I like talking to about the things I like talking about. And hopefully enough other people are interested in them to make it at least marginally popular. We'll see.
Yeah, hopefully something I said is of value to somebody, right? And it's nice for me.
No, I'm sure. Well, I had to give you props on a couple things because I've been thinking I always think a lot about training. You know that. Like I like kind of doing a deep dive in this stuff.
That's how you get better.
It is. That's how you get better as a person too. I really like that whole Japanese martial art mentality cliche. There's really a lot of truth to it. You polish yourself as a person by polishing yourself in a craft, at a skill, at being good at something. That doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to still be a jackass, because if you were a huge jackass to begin with, you're probably just better at being a jackass by the time you polish yourself. But it does guarantee that you'll be the best version of you that you can be, right? The most you can be. All right, so tell everybody where to find you on social media. I know you don't really have a company or anything else, but you do have a range, you have matches, you do. Yeah. So let everybody know about that. And if they do open up the voting process in any fashion for the IPSC rep for the US, I, for one, would love to see you make it. So let's get that out there too.
Oh, appreciate it. It would be nice. We'll talk about the IPSC thing another time, but you can find me. My Instagram's where I put all my shooting content. So I believe it's Eric._.Kamps that's my Instagram handle. Otherwise, Eric Kamps on Facebook. If you find me, the thing about Facebook is I'll also post pug pictures, baby pictures, more life stuff. But if you're just interested in the shooting stuff, eric_._.kamps, that'll find me on Instagram. Hopefully, trying to post a decent amount. A little bit busy with stuff. And then as for matches, like I'm running the Northern Illinois section match. It's coming up in May. So if anybody's interested, we got some slots open. It's filling up, but we still have a few Sunday slots open. Otherwise, the Northern Illinois Shooting Association, NISA, we're out of Schultz in Muskego, Wisconsin. So running 4th Sundays now till October, and we do that every year. Otherwise, McHenry IPSC Shooting Society, we run 1st, 3rd, and 5th, October to May. I believe October to May. So we're right at getting towards the tail end of that season. And other than that, usually around the Midwest area shooting and sometimes a lot further away. So hoping to go to World Shoot this year, still waiting on a slot. Otherwise, we're thinking Panama or somewhere fun and warm in the fall.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about your competitive shooting career is that you are not afraid to go anywhere in the world with a gun and shoot a match.
Yeah, when we were in South Africa last year, people were shocked that I brought a baby there. I'm like, well, the match is in South Africa, so I'm bringing the baby to South Africa. And we had a great time.
All right. On that note, I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation with Eric as much as I did. And definitely check him out if you like shooting or even like training, or if you love pugs, the uglier the better. Then you definitely want to follow him on social media. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode, and I will talk to everybody later.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.